There's a story about a barber who one day wished to share his faith with his customers. And so one morning he got up and he decided that he would share his faith with the first customer that came in for a shave. And so when he opened his doors, the first customer came in for a shave, and the barber said, "Sit here in this chair, I have to go in the back, I'll be right back." So he goes into the back of the room and he prays this little prayer. "God, the first customer came in, and I'm hoping to witness to him. So give me the wisdom so I know what to say and the right things to say. Amen." And with that, the barber came out with his razor in his hand and he says, "Good morning, sir. I have a question for you. Are you ready to die?" Now, I will say that of all the 4 chapters of the book of Ruth, this one is my favorite. Today, you are going to hear a story that may shock you. You may listen to yourself and you may say to yourself, "Wow, I didn't know that happened." And that was in the Bible. You may hear a story that doesn't sound so pure and innocent and holy for the Bible. Because when you think about it, the Bible is life. And we know that life is not pure and innocent and holy. The Bible mirrors life. Life is fun. It's full of drama, mischief, and innuendo. Moments when you're thinking to yourself, "Wow, I hope someone's writing this down." And then, of course, because it's the Bible, there is a message, no matter what the story. Today we come to the 3rd Sunday of November, which means chapter 3. So let's have a little recap here before we ask Jerry Lynn to share with us chapter 3. In chapter 1, we learned of Naomi and Ruth. Naomi is Ruth's mother-in-law. They met in the country of Moab. There Naomi's son marries Ruth. In Moab, Naomi loses everything. Her husband dies, her 2 sons die, leaving only Ruth. After this grievous loss, Naomi decides to go back home to Israel, and Ruth goes with her. Then in chapter 2, we learn that Naomi and Ruth are hungry, and Ruth decides to take the initiative to go and find some food. In the search, Ruth ends up in the field owned by Boaz, and there Ruth gets the attention of the owner of the field. Boaz, in looking at Ruth, says that he notices that all that she has done for her mother-in-law. One, Ruth has traveled from her neighboring Moab to Israel, and then also how determined she is to find food for her and her mother-in-law. And also we learn in chapter 2, and this is really important, and it's an important piece, Naomi and Boaz are related. Ruth's husband has passed away, which means that Ruth can marry whoever she wants. And we also realize something at the end of chapter 2, is that Ruth and Boaz kind of have a little liking to each other. As I said, this story gets really interesting. So let us hear from chapter 3.
I'm reading from the Good News Bible. Ruth finds a husband. Sometime later, Naomi said to Ruth, "I must find a husband for you, so that you will have a home of your own. Remember that this man Boaz, whose women you have been working with, is our relative. Now listen, this evening he will be threshing the barley. So wash yourself, put on some perfume, and get dressed in your best clothes. Then go where he is threshing, but don't let him know you are there until he has finished eating and drinking. Be sure to notice where he lies down, and after he falls asleep, go and lift the covers and lie down at his feet. He will tell you what to do." Ruth answered, "I will do everything you say." So Ruth went to the threshing place and did just what her mother-in-law had told her. When Boaz had finished eating and drinking, he was in a good mood. He went to the pile of barley and lay down to sleep. Ruth slipped over quietly, lifted the covers, and lay down at his feet. During the night, he woke up suddenly, turned over, and was surprised to find a woman lying at his feet. "Who are you?" he asked. "It's Ruth, sir," she answered. "Because you're a close relative, you are responsible for taking care of me. So please marry me." "The Lord bless you," he said. "You are showing even more greater family loyalty in what you are doing now than in what you did for your mother-in-law. You might have gone looking for a young man, either rich or poor, but you haven't. Now don't worry, Ruth. I will do everything you asked, as everyone in town knows you are a fine woman. It is true that I am a close relative and I am responsible for you, but there is a man who is a closer relative than I. Stay here the rest of the night, and in the morning you will find out whether or not he will take responsibility for you. If so, well and good. If not, then I swear by the living Lord that I will take responsibility. Now lie down and stay here till morning." So she lay there at his feet. But she got up before it was light enough for her to be seen, because Boaz did not want anyone to know that she had been there. Boaz said to her, "Take off your cloak and spread it out here." She did, and he poured almost 50 pounds of barley and helped her lift it to her shoulder. Then she returned to town with it. When she arrived at home, her mother-in-law asked her, "How did you get along, daughter?" Ruth told her everything that Boaz had done for her. She added, "He told me I must not come back to you empty-handed, so he gave me all this barley." Naomi said to her, "Now be patient, Ruth, until you see how this all turns out. Boaz will not rest today until he settles this matter." May the Lord add his blessing to the reading of his word.
Thank you. What a turn of events. In our first 2 chapters, everything seems bleak for Naomi and Ruth. What we learn from Naomi is she loses everything, or at least everything that she considers to be important. Her husband, her sons die, she's in a foreign land, and when she goes home, in fact, in chapter 1, she greets everyone and she says, "Don't call me Naomi, call me bitter, because I have lost everything." You see, in biblical society, when a woman loses her father and then her husband and then her sons, she does not fit into society. Biblical society did not know what to do with her. And then there's Ruth. We learn that she is a Moabite. This is important. She is a foreigner. She is an outsider. She has no relatives in Israel. In the first 2 chapters, she is constantly referred to by that label, a Moabite, a foreigner. Likewise, she also does not fit in to society. Now, there are so many places that I could go with chapter 3, but the part that I love the most is that no matter how bleak our situation, no matter how we think things don't fit in, there is always the promise of a future. When 20-year-old Ruben Gonzalez went up to the U.S. Olympic Training Center in Lake Placid, New York, he had in his pocket a business card from a friend of his in Houston who believed in his dream of becoming an Olympian. Ruben was there to learn the sport of luge, and so you see a picture up there, a sport that 9 out of 10 aspirants give up in the first season. Almost everyone breaks at least one bone in their body before mastering the 90 mile an hour per race against time in an enclosed mile-long downhill track of concrete and ice. Okay, who's with me? Who wants to try the luge? But Ruben had a dream. He had passion. He had a commitment not to quit and the support of his friend Craig in Houston. When Ruben got back to his room after the first day of training, he called up Craig. "Craig, this is nuts," he said. "My side hurts. I think I broke my foot. That's it. I'm going back to soccer." Craig interrupted him. "Ruben, get in front of a mirror." "What?" "I said, get in front of a mirror," said Craig. So Ruben got up, he stretched the phone cord, he stood in front of a full-length mirror. "Now repeat after me," said Craig. "No matter how bad it is, how bad it gets, I'm going to make it." Ruben felt like an idiot. Here he was staring at himself in the mirror, and so in a very wimpy, wishy-washy way possible, he said, "No matter how bad it is, how bad it gets, I'm going to make it." "Come on," Craig said. "Say it right. You're Mr. Olympic man. That's all you ever talk about." Are you going to do it or not? So Reuben started getting serious. No matter how bad it is, how bad it gets, I'm going to make it. Again! No matter how bad it is, how bad it gets, I'm going to make it. And again, and again, and again. About the 5th time, Reuben said it. He thought, hey, this feels pretty good. I'm standing up a little bit straighter. By the 10th time, he kind of jumped up and he shouted in the air, I don't care what happens. I'm going to make it. I can break both legs. Bones heal. I can come back and I will make it. I will be an Olympian. As you can tell there, he was a 4-time Olympian. My friends, we've all been there. We have been convinced that tomorrow morning the sun will not come up. We have been convinced that report from the doctor will not turn out well. We have been convinced that we will not have enough money for retirement. We have been convinced that that phone call at 2 a.m. in the morning will not be good. We've been told that evaluation will not turn out well. It sure is hard to have the promise of a future when your thinking is stuck in those knots in the world. We've all been there. It's what happens in life. Now we've had what happens in life is a bit different, but the reactions are the same. We get hit by bad news a time or 2 or 3 or 4. We curl up in that fetal position. We lose our appetite. We cry, we rage, we stay in bed. We don't see the sun even though it's glaring at us in the face. We don't feel the presence of friends even though they're right by our side. We don't recognize what our spouses, what our family has done for us because we're so consumed with what is going on. My friends, this is the story of Ruth. It begins in Moab with loss. It continues in Israel with hunger. It moves on with Boaz, and we kind of wonder about this assurance of faith. There's no promise that things will get better. But as I said, these Bible stories, as racy as they come, all have a message for us. The future just might be brighter than we expect. There was a busload of UMW women that were coming down a mountain pass. It skidded off the row, and all 50 of these UMW women, United Methodist women, they all ended up at the pearly gates at the same time. St. Peter was quite overwhelmed. They were in the midst of redecorating, didn't know what they were going to do with all these 50 saints of the church, and so he called up his old friend, the devil. And he says, would you be willing to take these saints of the church just for a couple weeks while we get redecorating, while their mansion is done? The devil was a little reluctant, and he says, well, okay, I guess we need the money. So he took it upon himself and took them down. A few weeks passed, and St. Peter, he called up Satan, and he says, okay, their mansion is ready. You can send up those 50 saints of the church. And the devil says, can I keep them just for a couple more weeks? St. Peter was a little skeptical at this, and he says, why? And the devil says, all we need is 2 more cookie walks, and we'll have enough for air conditioning. Now there's assurance for you. The story of Ruth, it resonates with us. We can relate. Life beats us down. Assurances don't go our way. Our future goes awry. But there's always something that we can count on. The future is coming. As much as we fight it, tomorrow is going to happen tomorrow. Charles Kettering was a giant in the mechanical and electrical business. He worked in the auto industry. He invented well up into his 80s. He often would talk with his coworkers about the future. One time, one of his coworkers asked, why are you so interested in the future? Why, said Kettering. Why, I'm interested in the future because I have to spend all the rest of my life in it. The future is before us. Ruth could have dragged her feet coming out of Moab. She could have treated Naomi poorly for having to go out and find food for her. She could have resented the fact that she had to court another husband. But we know in these chapters of Ruth, that's not her character. Ruth has taught us so much. She's taught us to go beyond what was expected of us. She's taught us to be motivated to serve others. And she's taught us today to be open to the promise of the future. Now, right now, I was hoping to show you a video. Colleen knows what happened here. I went around and I asked some people in the church this question. What do you hope for in the future? And it was a great video. In fact, this week, I even asked my 15-year-old daughter how to put the video together. And she did. She actually wanted $20 of her time, so we're helping to put it together. It was a great video. But one thing I realized is you better save your backup copy when you have it. Because I went yesterday and went looking for it, and it was gone, and my backup copy was gone. So it was a very good video. So any of you that were kind of hoping that you weren't going to see yourself on the screen, don't worry, it's not up there. But I do remember what a few of you said when I asked this question. And I do apologize. I tried to, if I don't have it verbatim. But I asked people in this church, what do you hope for in the future? And these were their responses. Peace. Find a full-time job. Make something to sell to people for money. Have a healthy baby. A brighter future for the church. To be successful. For kindness to exist among all people. For our church to be a vital presence to all in the community. And for a better life. My friends, each of us resonates with the story of Ruth. When things don't work out, this is why we want things to work out. This is why we continue to watch Nebraska football. This is why we get out of bed in the morning to make sure that the sun is up, or as one person told me, to make sure that my name is not in the obituary section. We want the church to succeed. We want God to be vital in our lives and in the lives of our friends, our neighbors, our family. We care. More importantly, we believe that the future is a promise. As we read Ruth, we get a sense of her story. It's our story. And we go from bleakness to the promise of a future. A man one time stopped by a Little League game. As he was watching it, he was able to get a hold of one of the boys. He said, "What's the score?" And this little boy looked up to him and he said, "It's 18-0, and we have nothing." And the man said, "Are you a bit discouraged?" And the little boy said, "Why should we be discouraged? We haven't been up to bat yet." My friends, the promise of the future is our hope. God leads us to better things. No matter the score, no matter the doctor's report, no matter our bank account, no matter our relationship status on Facebook, no matter what happens in our faith life, no matter what, the promise of a future keeps us going. When Pastor David Patterson was preparing a sermon, his little daughter came in and asked if they could play. But the pastor said that he was working on his sermon, and so he looked at his daughter and he says, "Sweetheart, I'd love to play with you, but can you just give me an hour and then we can play?" "Okay," she said, "but when you're finished, I'm going to give you a great big hug." So when she got to the door, she did a U-turn and she came right back to her dad and she gave him one of those bone-crushing hugs. And the dad kind of teasingly said, "But I thought you were going to wait until I was done to give me a hug." And his daughter said, "I just wanted you to know what you have to look forward to." I invite you to come next week for the exciting conclusion of Ruth. I'm guessing many of you probably don't know how it's going to end. Now, you can go ahead and read it. Now, there's a couple details that I will add to the story next week. But as we look to the promise of the future, remember that all that Ruth had to go through. She never gave up. Naomi never gave up on her. And as we find out next week, this is something wonderful to look forward to. Because God's not given up on us yet. God's not given up on the church. God's not given up on our faith. The promise of the future is bright. And for this, we have something to look forward to. Amen.
Amen.
At this time, I invite our ushers to wait upon us as we give back to God.